Well, welcome back to the right wing from Civically Minded, where we look at the intersection between faith and politics. I'm your host, Corey Wing. Well, today marked the end of the longest government shutdown in American history. After 43 days, six House Democrats broke ranks and voted to end the shutdown. But what was accomplished at the end of the day? Some say not much, but personally, I'm not sure that I agree with that assessment. You see, the Democrats have very limited power in DC in the second term of Donald Trump's presidency, or at least for now. And because of that, they can't really oppose him as openly as they did for the last 8 years. So, what was impeachment trials and deep state hardliners, lawfare, and, well, pushing every progressive policy they could push, has now, by necessity, become more of a guerrilla style campaign of stonewalling, media propaganda, and, well, sabotage by any means available. I want you to see this clearly. The left has an iron will and a killer instinct that should never be underestimated. They're willing to hurt and hurt millions of Americans. I mean, let's be honest, COVID should have definitively shown us this. So, whether it's by healthcare or generational inner city poverty, sexual deviancy of every kind, abortion, genital mutilation, or, well, a conveniently placed government shutdown. But the fallout of this shutdown, both politically and economically, is yet to really be seen. And I have real reservations about the victory laps that will be attempted now that a weak consensus has been won. The Democrats didn't really get anything for all of their stalling and obstructionism, but the Republicans now must wear the look of impotence despite owning every branch of government. Not to mention being labeled the uncaring party that was willing to see the neediest Americans suffer the loss of food stamps and other benefits. But what was revealing to me about this entire episode was how much it exposed the god of the system to be a phony. The deific strength and omnipresence of our federal government was shown to be nothing more than a weak idol, incapable of shouldering its own debt, much less the hopes and aspirations of 300 plus million Americans. Thankfully, with the newly minted continuing resolution, we can now limp along for another, well, 78 days or so until we once again find ourselves completely broke on January 30th of 2026. It really does remind me of Proverbs 22 verse 7, which says, quote, "The rich rules over the poor and the borrower is slave to the lender." End quote. You see, the government doesn't really have money. It gets that from us, the taxpayers. And, well, the taxpayers in this nation, by and large, are also in terrible debt. So it just becomes a self perpetuating thing. But here's what I think most pundits seem to have missed about the shutdown. Whoever's in power when something like this happens is the one that's going to wear the brunt of the blame. And it won't matter that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats' refusal to come to the table is what caused the initial shutdown, or that they were refusing to sign a continuing resolution that was basically identical to all the ones they signed during the Biden administration. It won't even matter that it was their continued unwillingness to grant any kind of a win to President Trump or the Republicans that so significantly postponed the ending of the shutdown. All the American people will remember when the midterms roll around is who was in power when the SNAP benefits were gone and the flights were canceled. You see, there's a somewhat unrealistic expectation by the public that whoever's in power can simply accomplish all their desires regardless of the cooperation or lack thereof from the other side of the aisle. But the truth of the matter is that we're in an era of American politics where nonpartisan cooperation is basically dead. Gone are the days of Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich deciding that governing the people wisely is what's in the best interest of America, and that that's enough to make sense for both parties. I mean, am I oversimplifying the early and mid 90s, politically speaking? Yeah, a little, but by modern standards, quite honestly, not much. And if I'm being honest, neither of those men would be welcomed in DC any longer at all, or at least not as they were in 1992. And if they're being honest, neither of them recognize their own political parties any longer. I mean, the modern Republican Party actually resembles something closer to the Democratic Party of the 80s and early 90s. And the modern Democratic Party resembles nothing American at all. We have never been a socialistic, communistic type of society, but that is actually where the modern Democrat Party is headed. Our 42nd president, the aforementioned Bill Clinton, actually signed the Defense of Marriage Act, banning federal recognition of same sex marriage and limiting the definition of marriage to the union of one man and one woman. Can you even imagine that happening in today's Democrat Party? But back in those days, Donald Trump was a friend of the Clintons, and modern Democratic leaders like Zoran Mamdani had just been born, and the seemingly ever present Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, well, she was 3. You see, post 9/11 America, well, it would change things forever. And post war on terror America became jaded after another lengthy overseas war that cost too much money and too many lives. And it would become a breeding ground for the modern Democratic Party. So after 2008, it would be Saul Alinsky acolytes raised on a steady diet of Howard Zinn revisionist history and deep personal grievance culture that would begin to define the modern left. Now, that's what it is. And of course, it's become an ideological game of chicken. And the first one to flinch, well, they lose. But the real loser in the system, of course, is the American people themselves. I'm not the first talking head to have stated this obvious truth, but the reality is that if we can't learn to work towards some kind of a common interest on either side of the aisle, then our fractured social ills will continue and sadly deepen. And states will continue to polarize into increasingly red and blue, and populations will, of course, continue to relocate according to these new realities. And as this grows, these states will feel the need to differentiate along these ever widening lines, making hyper partisan choices that will, well, more clearly express their allegiance to whatever voting bloc they're trying to appeal to the most. So, if you're in New York City, you'll elect a new mayor that's a Muslim and a socialist, which of course I predicted back in June here on my channel. Or if you're California, while you're the state with by far the highest debt, you're going to pass Proposition 50, giving those same Democrats even more control. You know, the same Democrats who unequivocally are the ones that have been steering you into such uncontrollable debt, violence, and homelessness to begin with. Or if you're Virginia, you're going to renounce your recent Republican governor and attorney general for some all new Democrats. And that would include a man who recently and openly stated he wants to see the death of his political opponents and their children. I mean, that didn't seem to slow anyone down for voting for the guy. Luckily, it's not like he's going to be the top prosecutor in the state or anything. And then you have red states, and they're going to continue to move more staunchly in their own directions, with states like Florida making a name for itself as the champion of personal freedom and a state that's very tough and serious about law and order. And honestly, Governor DeSantis, well, he's even considering abolishing non school homestead property taxes in 2026, again, to differentiate himself from other conservative southern states. And to the west, Governor Abbott continues to offer a welcoming environment for conservatives in the Lone Star State, with some of the toughest laws on abortion and, well, other incentives as well. And then you have purple states like my own here in North Carolina. We are increasingly hotbeds of political discord. And simultaneously, somehow we've become crown jewels that both parties are willing to fight over and spend millions to see flip to their side. But when you're purple, I'm not certain which side that'll be. Now, all of this makes the old national motto of e pluribus unum, or out of many, one, seem like nothing more than a catchy, albeit anachronistic slogan. It's not all that truthful of who we are any longer. Now, of course, I'm sure some of you can't wait to get in the comments and say, we've never been that way. That's a debate for a different video. But however, there is an ancient motto of the Old Testament that I do think seems rather fitting. It comes from the book of Judges, where their refrain was, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Unfortunately, that motto, while fitting, is from a time in Israel's history where they were steeped in moral vacuity and they found themselves under intense divine judgment. Well, come to think of it, maybe we have more in common with that than we're comfortable to admit, because sin is still a reproach to any people. So, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, because this is indeed advice that I've given multiple times over the last 2 years on this channel, our only real hope of avoiding this kind of continued judgment and an ever increasing civil divide here in America is to follow the biblical prescription found in Second Chronicles 7:14, which states, quote, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and will seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. End quote. For the right wing from Civically Minded, I'm Corey Wing. God bless.